The wind that swept down from Aspen Mountain on New Year's Eve carried more than just the bite of winter. It carried the weight of 12 years of unanswered questions, 12 years of sleepless nights, and 12 years of a mother's love stretched thin across impossible circumstances. Elena Vasquez pressed her face against the frosted window of the employee break room, watching the snow fall in thick, lazy flakes that seemed to mock the urgency pounding in her chest. In 3 hours, she would begin her final shift of the year at the Alpine Crown, Aspen's most exclusive restaurant, a place where a single bottle of wine cost more than she made in a month, where the wealthy came to see and be seen, where money flowed like water and conscience was a luxury few could afford. The break room fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows across her reflection. At 28, Elena carried herself with a dignity that poverty couldn't touch, but the exhaustion was becoming harder to hide. Dark circles rimmed her eyes like bruises, and her hands, once soft and artistic, now bore the calluses of someone who had scrubbed, served, and scraped for every dollar. Her uniform, pressed with care despite its 3-year age, hung slightly loose on her frame, a testament to too many skipped meals, too many late-night study sessions fueled by nothing but coffee and determination. She pulled her phone from her pocket, the screen cracked in a spider web pattern that she'd grown accustomed to seeing the world through. A text from Mrs. Chen, her neighbor who watched Sophia during her shifts, appeared through the fractured glass. "Sophia's asleep. Asked 3 times when Mama's coming home. I told her after the ball drops on TV." Elena's heart clenched. Another New Year's Eve spent away from her daughter, another milestone missed in the name of survival. But Sophia needed health insurance, Sophia needed food, Sophia needed a mother who could pay for law school textbooks and still keep the lights on. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was studying law, justice, while serving those who had likely never faced a day of real consequence in their lives. The service corridor outside the break room hummed with pre-dinner preparation. The scent of truffle oil and aged beef mingled with the sharper odors of bleach and industrial soap, a constant reminder of the two worlds that existed within these walls. Upstairs, crystal glasses would soon be filled with champagne that cost more per bottle than Elena's monthly rent. Down here, in the bowels of luxury, workers like her moved like ghosts, essential but invisible, necessary but unacknowledged. Elena straightened her black uniform and checked her appearance in the cracked mirror beside the time clock. Her reflection stared back, determined, weary, but unbroken. She had learned long ago that dignity was something you wore from within, something that no amount of wealth could buy and no amount of poverty could steal. Her mother had taught her that, in those final moments 12 years ago, when the warehouse flames had painted the night sky orange and everything Elena thought she knew about the world had crumbled to ash. Mija, her mother's voice echoed across time, as clear as if Maria Vasquez were standing beside her now. "Remember, the rich, they think money makes them better. But money is just paper. Character, that's what makes a person rich." 20 floors above Elena's preparation, in a penthouse suite that overlooked the very restaurant where she worked, Marcus Ashworth stood before floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Aspen's glittering landscape. The world spread below him like a kingdom, snow-covered peaks stretching endlessly, luxury homes dotting the mountainside like scattered jewels, ski slopes carved into the earth like scars of privilege. His reflection in the window showed a man who had everything, and felt nothing. At 45, Marcus possessed the kind of wealth that could reshape landscapes, influence elections, and change the course of entire industries. His net worth fluctuated by millions with each market breath, but the number that haunted him most was far simpler: 365. The number of days each year he celebrated alone. The penthouse around him was a testament to isolated perfection. Modern art worth millions adorned walls that no friend had ever seen. A dining table for 12 had never seated more than one. The silence was so complete that it seemed to have weight, pressing down on him like the accumulated mass of all his wealth, all his success, all his carefully constructed barriers against human connection. Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the amber prescription bottle on his marble countertop. The pills rattled like dice in a cup. Ativan, his doctor had prescribed them for anxiety, but Marcus knew they served a deeper purpose. They helped him forget. Not everything, never everything, but enough. Enough to sleep. Enough to function. Enough to maintain the fiction that his success was built on merit rather than ash. He dry swallowed 2 pills, then immediately regretted not taking 3. Tonight was New Year's Eve, his annual pilgrimage to Table 47 at the Alpine Crown, where he would perform the same ritual he had performed for 5 years running. One man, one table, one red rose that he could never quite explain. The restaurant staff thought it eccentric behavior from a reclusive billionaire. They had no idea it was penance. The red rose sat in its crystal vase on his coffee table, perfect and blood-colored against the stark white of his living space. He had grown it himself in his private greenhouse, from seeds that held a significance his medication-addled mind could only grasp in fragments. Sometimes, in the space between sleep and waking, he could almost remember where those seeds had come from, a woman's purse, perhaps, or a final gift from someone he had lost. But the details always slipped away like smoke, leaving only the compulsion to honor something he couldn't name. Marcus moved to his walk-in closet, larger than most people's apartments, where rows of identical black suits hung like a monotonous army. He selected one at random. They were all custom-tailored, all worth more than Elena made in 6 months, all designed to project an image of power that felt increasingly hollow. As he dressed, his reflection in the mirrored wall showed a man imprisoned by his own success, wealthy beyond measure, but bankrupt in ways that mattered. The irony was exquisite in its cruelty. Marcus Ashworth, who had built his fortune on fire suppression technology, who had marketed himself as someone who prevented disasters, was himself a walking catastrophe. The pills that helped him forget were slowly killing his liver. The isolation that protected him from emotional pain was slowly strangling his soul. And tonight, as every New Year's Eve for the past 5 years, he would sit alone at table 47, surrounded by empty chairs, placing a single red rose where another person might sit, if he could remember who. In the service corridors below, Elena checked the duty roster one final time. Table 47. The corner table that overlooked the roaring Fork Valley, requested by name by their most reclusive regular customer. Marcus Ashworth. She had served him before, of course, had watched him perform his strange ritual with the rose, had noticed the way his hands shook slightly when he thought no one was looking, had seen the profound loneliness that radiated from him like cold from a glacier. Most of the serving staff avoided table 47. Ashworth tipped well but spoke little, existing in a bubble of wealth and sadness that seemed almost contagious. But tonight Elena felt drawn to that table in a way she couldn't explain. Perhaps it was the approaching new year, the weight of another 12 months without answers about her parents' death. Perhaps it was Sophia's question from that morning, "Mama, why do some people have so much and others have so little?" Or perhaps it was something deeper, a recognition that resonated in her bones, a familiarity that danced just beyond conscious thought. When Elena had briefly glimpsed Marcus Ashworth 3 weeks ago, something about his mismatched eyes, one green, one blue, had stirred a memory she couldn't quite grasp. It was like seeing a ghost of someone she should know but couldn't place. As the dinner service began, Elena tied her apron and checked her order pad one final time. Tonight, she would serve table 47. Tonight, she would look directly into those haunting, mismatched eyes. And tonight, though she didn't yet know it, the careful walls that both she and Marcus had built around their hearts would finally, irrevocably, begin to crumble. The clock on the break room wall ticked toward 7 p.m., and Elena Vasquez walked toward the dining room, carrying with her the weight of 12 years of questions, the hope of a mother trying to build a better future, and the unshakable feeling that this New Year's Eve would change everything. She had no idea how right she was. The scent of sawdust and electrical components filled the evening air as 10-year-old Maria Vasquez helped her father close the family electronics shop for the night. It was 1985, and Vasquez Electronics had been the beating heart of Denver's warehouse district for 15 years, a modest empire built on honest work, fair prices, and the unshakable belief that a handshake meant more than any contract. "Mija," Roberto Vasquez said, his calloused hands gently guiding his daughter's smaller ones as she learned to test circuit boards, "remember this, in business, your reputation is the only currency that matters. Money comes and goes, but trust takes a lifetime to build and only a moment to destroy." Maria nodded solemnly, her dark eyes reflecting the warm glow of the workshop's overhead lights. Even at 10, she possessed an intuitive understanding of electronics that amazed her father's customers. While other children played with dolls, Maria played with resistors and capacitors, learning to diagnose problems by the sound a machine made, the smell of overheated components, the subtle vibrations that spoke of mechanical distress. The Vasquez family lived simply but richly, their wealth measured not in dollars but in the deep satisfaction of work well done, in the loyalty of customers who became friends, in the knowledge that every circuit board they repaired, every television they restored to life, made someone's world a little brighter. 28 years later, Elena Vasquez stood in the cramped bathroom of her Aspen apartment, staring at a photograph yellowed with age. Her parents on their wedding day, Roberto's arm wrapped protectively around Maria's waist, both of them radiating a happiness so pure it seemed to glow from the faded paper. Roberto wore his only suit, pressed with military precision despite its frayed cuffs. Maria wore her grandmother's wedding dress, altered to fit her petite frame, a spray of wildflowers in her dark hair because they couldn't afford a proper bouquet. Elena's fingers traced the edges of the photograph, careful not to damage the precious corners that had already begun to curl with time. This image was all she had left of her parents' joy, everything else had been consumed by flames on a cold February night 12 years ago. "Mama," Sophia's sleepy voice called from the bedroom they shared, "are you getting ready for work?" Elena quickly wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling and tucked the photograph back into the small wooden box where she kept her most treasured possessions. "Yes, baby. Mama has to work tonight, but Mrs. Chen will stay with you until I get home." She moved to the bedroom, where Sophia lay surrounded by stuffed animals that had seen better days but were loved fiercely nonetheless. At 8 years old, Sophia possessed an otherworldly beauty that sometimes took Elena's breath away. Her features were delicate but strong, her skin the color of café au lait, and her eyes were what haunted Elena's dreams. One green, one blue. Elena had first noticed Sophia's heterochromia when she adopted her 3 years ago, after her birth mother Carmen had died in that terrible car accident. The condition was rare, striking perhaps 1 in 10,000 children, and Elena had spent countless hours researching it online. Heterochromia could be genetic, passed down through families like a mysterious gift. But Sophia's birth father was unknown, Carmen had died before revealing his identity, and Elena had no family history to reference. Sometimes, in quiet moments like this, Elena would study Sophia's mismatched eyes and feel a strange recognition stirring in her chest, as if she had seen those exact eyes before, in another face, in another time. But the memory always slipped away like smoke, leaving only a vague unease that settled in her stomach like swallowed stones. "Will you be home before the new year, Mama?" Sophia asked, her small hands clutching a worn teddy bear that Elena had bought at a thrift store when Sophia first came to live with her. Elena sat on the edge of the narrow bed they shared, brushing Sophia's dark hair away from her forehead. "I'll try, mi amor. But if I'm not, when the clock strikes midnight, you make a wish for both of us, okay?" "What should I wish for?" Elena's throat tightened. What did a working mother wish for when she barely had time to dream? Wish for answers. And for the people who hurt good families to face justice. Sophia nodded gravely, as if she understood the weight behind her mother's words. And perhaps she did. Children who grew up in the shadows of tragedy often developed an early wisdom about the world's capacity for both cruelty and grace. As Elena prepared for her shift at the Alpine Crown, she opened the wooden box one more time and retrieved a small object wrapped in tissue paper. Unfolding the delicate layers revealed a silver locket, tarnished with age but still beautiful in its simplicity. Inside the locket were two tiny photographs, one of Roberto and Maria Vasquez on their wedding day, and another of 10-year-old Elena standing proudly beside her father's workbench. The locket had been her mother's, the only piece of jewelry Maria had ever owned, given to her by Roberto on their first anniversary when money was tight but love was abundant. Elena wore it every day, hidden beneath her uniform, a tangible reminder of where she came from and why she fought so hard to build something better. But tonight, as she fastened the delicate chain around her neck, Elena found herself thinking not just about her parents' love, but about their final moments. The warehouse fire that killed them had been ruled accidental, faulty wiring in an aging electrical system. But Elena remembered details that had never sat right with her investigative mind, the way her father had been working late that night on a revolutionary new fire suppression system, the mysterious phone calls he'd been receiving in the weeks before his death, the competitor who had suddenly emerged from nowhere with identical technology just months after the fire. Detective Ray Morales had believed her suspicions, had spent months investigating connections that seemed too convenient to be coincidental. But then, without warning, his investigation had been shut down. Federal authorities had swept in, classified the case files, and Ray had been forced into early retirement with a pension and a warning to let sleeping dogs lie. Elena had never let them lie. Every spare moment she wasn't working or studying or caring for Sophia, she spent researching. She had taught herself to navigate corporate filing systems, to trace shell companies and offshore accounts, to follow paper trails that led through labyrinthine networks of lawyers and holding companies. Somewhere in that maze of financial obfuscation was the truth about who had killed her parents and why. And tonight, as she prepared to serve table 47 at the Alpine Crown, Elena felt closer to answers than she had in months. 3 weeks ago, she had finally traced the ownership of the restaurant itself through a series of shell companies that all led back to one name, Ashworth Industries. The same company that had revolutionized fire suppression technology. The same company whose founder would be sitting alone at table 47 in 2 hours, placing a single red rose where another person might sit. Elena checked her appearance one final time in the cracked mirror beside her dresser. Her uniform was pressed, her hair pulled back in the regulation bun required by Alpine Crown management, her makeup carefully applied to hide the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. But beneath the professional facade, her mind raced with possibilities and her heart pounded with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Tonight, she would look directly into Marcus Ashworth's mismatched eyes and search for the truth that had eluded her for 12 years. Tonight, she would serve the man she suspected of destroying her family with the same grace and dignity her parents had taught her to maintain in the face of adversity. And tonight, Elena Vasquez would finally understand that justice sometimes came wearing an apron and carrying a serving tray, that the daughter of Roberto and Maria Vasquez had inherited more than just their work ethic and moral compass. She had inherited their courage. As she kissed Sophia goodnight and stepped into the bitter aspen evening, Elena whispered a prayer to her parents' memory. Help me be strong enough for what's coming. Help me find the truth. And help me make you proud. The wind carried her words up toward the mountain peaks, where snow fell like tears from a darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance, Marcus Ashworth was preparing for a dinner that would change everything he thought he knew about his carefully constructed world. The past was about to collide with the present, and the truth was about to sit down uninvited at table 47. The dining room of the Alpine Crown hummed with the low murmur of privilege. Crystal glasses clinked against fine china, designer heels clicked across marble floors, and conversations flowed in the practiced cadence of those who had never known want. The amber glow from the massive chandelier cast everything in shades of gold and honey, creating an atmosphere where money felt as natural as breathing. Elena moved through this rarefied world like a shadow, her serving tray balanced with the practiced grace of someone who had learned to become invisible while remaining indispensable. She had been working the dinner service for 2 hours now, watching the wealthy celebrate the approaching new year with the casual extravagance that came from never having to choose between rent and groceries. But her attention kept drifting to table 47. Marcus Ashworth sat alone in the corner alcove, just as he had every New Year's Eve for the past 5 years. His black suit was immaculate, his posture rigid with the kind of controlled tension that spoke of deep, unresolved pain. The single red rose lay across from him on the white tablecloth, positioned with mathematical precision, as if its placement held some significance that only he understood. From across the dining room, Elena studied his profile. Even in the flattering golden light, Marcus looked haggard, his face drawn, his movements slightly unsteady. She watched him reach into his jacket pocket and palm something small, pills, she realized, before washing them down with his water glass when he thought no one was looking. His mismatched eyes, one green, one blue, caught the light as he turned slightly toward the window. Elena's breath hitched in her throat. Those eyes, she had seen them before. Not just in passing glances during previous dinner services, but somewhere deeper in her memory. Somewhere that made her chest tighten with recognition she couldn't name. Elena. Thomas Chen, the head chef, appeared beside her with the subtle stealth that all restaurant workers mastered. To the diners, he was simply part of the background, but Elena had always sensed there was more to Thomas than met the eye. Table 47 is requesting his usual server. Elena's pulse quickened. His usual server is Marie, isn't she? Marie called in sick. Food poisoning. Thomas's dark eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. He specifically asked for you by name. The word sent a chill down Elena's spine. In 5 years of working at the Alpine Crown, she had never directly served Marcus Ashworth. She had seen him, of course, had observed his lonely ritual from across the dining room, but they had never exchanged more than polite nods. How did he even know her name? Did he say why he wanted me specifically? Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas shook his head, but something in his expression suggested he knew more than he was revealing. Just take his order, Elena. And... He paused, glancing around to ensure they weren't being overheard. Be careful. There are things about Mr. Ashworth that, well, just be careful. With her heart hammering against her ribs, Elena approached table 47. Each step felt weighted with significance, as if she were walking toward a precipice from which there would be no return. The red rose seemed to watch her approach, its petals the color of dried blood in the candlelight. Marcus Ashworth looked up as she neared his table, and Elena felt the world tilt slightly on its axis. Up close, his face was a map of carefully hidden suffering, fine lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, a tightness around his mouth that suggested words he could never say. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold. Those impossible, mismatched eyes that seemed to peer directly into her soul. "Good evening, Mr. Ashworth," Elena managed, her professional composure intact despite the storm raging inside her chest. "I'm Elena. I'll be serving you tonight." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, his expression cycling through confusion, recognition, and something that looked almost like fear. When he spoke, his voice was rough, as if he hadn't used it in hours. "Elena," he repeated slowly, as if testing the weight of her name. "Elena Vasquez." It wasn't a question. Elena's blood turned to ice water. "Yes, sir." "How did you?" "You have your mother's eyes," Marcus said quietly, his gaze never leaving her face. "Maria always had the most expressive eyes. They could make you believe in heaven, or show you exactly what hell looked like." The serving tray slipped from Elena's numb fingers, crashing to the marble floor with a sound like breaking thunder. Crystal water glasses shattered, sending shards skittering across the dining room like scattered stars. The entire restaurant fell silent, every conversation stopping mid-sentence as all eyes turned toward table 47. But Elena barely noticed the stares, barely heard the sharp intake of breath from nearby diners. All she could focus on was the impossible reality of what Marcus Ashworth had just said. He knew her mother's name. He knew her mother. How? Elena's voice came out as a broken whisper. "How do you know my mother's name?" Marcus's hand trembled as he reached for his water glass, and Elena saw him swallow hard before answering. When he looked at her again, his mismatched eyes held a pain so profound it seemed to have physical weight. "Because 28 years ago, I was in love with her," he said simply. "And 12 years ago, I killed her." The words hung in the air between them like a verdict. Elena felt her knees buckle, felt the blood drain from her face as the dining room spun around her. Conversations had resumed at other tables, but softer now, as if the other diners sensed that something momentous was happening in the corner alcove. "Sit down," Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm. "Please. Before you fall down." Elena stared at him, every instinct screaming at her to run, to scream, to demand answers. But her legs felt like water, and the chair across from him, the chair where the red rose lay, seemed to exert its own gravitational pull. Almost without conscious thought, she found herself sinking into the seat, the rose now between them like an accusation. "You're lying," Elena whispered, though even as she said it, she knew he wasn't. The pain in his eyes was too raw, too immediate to be fabricated. "You're sick. You're confused." Marcus laughed bitterly, a sound like breaking glass. "I wish I were. God, how I wish I were just a sick old man having delusions. But I'm not, Elena. I'm exactly what I appear to be, a monster who has spent 12 years trying to forget what he did to the only family he ever loved." Around them, Elena was dimly aware of movement. Other servers were cleaning up the broken glass from her dropped tray, the maitre d' was smoothly managing the disruption, and life in the dining room was returning to its expensive normalcy. But at table 47, time seemed suspended, caught between past and present, between truth and denial. "My parents died in a warehouse fire," Elena said, her voice growing stronger. "It was an accident. Faulty wiring. The investigation." "The investigation was shut down," Marcus finished. "Federal authorities classified the files. Detective Morales was forced into early retirement. And I've been living with what I did ever since." Elena's mind reeled. How did he know about Detective Morales? How did he know about the classified files? Unless... You, she breathed. You were behind the cover-up. Marcus nodded slowly, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of confession was physically crushing him. I had the resources. The connections. The desperation of a man who had destroyed everything good in his life and couldn't bear to face the consequences. From across the dining room, Elena caught sight of Thomas Chen watching their table intently. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Thomas gave her an almost imperceptible nod, as if he had been waiting for this moment, as if he knew exactly what was happening. But Elena's attention snapped back to Marcus as he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small amber prescription bottle. His hands shook as he opened it, and instead of pills, he extracted something that made Elena's world stop completely. A micro SD card. 12 years, Marcus said, staring at the tiny piece of technology that held such enormous consequences. 12 years I've carried this with me. 12 years I've taken pills to forget what's on it. But tonight I can't forget anymore. Tonight, the medication isn't working. Tonight, I remember everything. Elena stared at the micro SD card as if it were a venomous snake. What's on it? Security footage from the night your parents died, Marcus said simply. Footage that shows exactly how the fire started. Footage that shows what I did. The red rose between them seemed to pulse with significance, and suddenly Elena understood. The ritual. The lonely dinners. The precise placement of the flower across from his empty chair. The rose, she whispered. It's for her. For my mother. Marcus's eyes filled with unshed tears. I grow them from seeds that were in her purse when they found her. I've been coming here every New Year's Eve, placing a rose where she might have sat if I hadn't destroyed everything. Elena felt something inside her chest crack open, not her heart, but something deeper. The careful wall she had built around her pain, her anger, her need for justice. For 12 years, she had imagined confronting her parents' killer. She had pictured screaming at them, demanding explanations, watching them squirm under the weight of their guilt. She had never imagined this, a broken man who seemed to be drowning in remorse, who carried evidence of his own crime like a penance, who honored her mother's memory with rituals he couldn't explain. Why? Elena asked, her voice barely audible. Why did you kill them? Marcus closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they held the hollow look of someone staring into an abyss of his own making. Because your mother broke my heart 20 years ago, and I never learned how to let go of what I couldn't have. If this story has caught your attention so far, if you're feeling the same outrage and curiosity that Elena is experiencing right now, let us know in the comments what moment hit you the hardest. Sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that make us question everything we thought we knew about justice, forgiveness, and the weight of the past. The silence that followed Marcus's confession stretched between them like a chasm, filled with the weight of 12 years of hidden truth. Elena sat motionless, her mind struggling to process the impossible reality that the man she had searched for, the killer she had sworn to bring to justice, was sitting across from her in a designer suit, placing roses on restaurant tables like offerings to the dead. Around them, the dining room continued its elegant dance of privilege, servers gliding between tables with champagne flutes, diners laughing at private jokes, the soft clink of silverware against fine china. But at table 47, time seemed frozen in amber, suspended between revelation and reckoning. 20 years ago, Marcus began, his voice hollow as winter wind, your mother and I were at the University of Colorado together. Engineering students. We were lab partners in advanced electronics. She was brilliant, Elena. Absolutely brilliant. She could see solutions to problems that stumped professors with decades of experience. Elena's hand instinctively went to the silver locket hidden beneath her uniform, where the photograph of her parents' wedding day lay close to her heart. Her mother, brilliant. She had always known it, but hearing it from Marcus somehow made it more real, and more painful. I fell in love with her the first day I saw her, Marcus continued, his mismatched eyes staring past Elena toward a memory only he could see. She was working on a circuit board, completely absorbed, and she had this way of biting her lower lip when she was concentrating. I used to time my arrival at the lab just to watch her work. Elena felt something twist in her stomach. This wasn't the story of a cold-blooded killer. This was the story of a young man's obsession, of love that had curdled into something darker. Did she know how you felt? Elena asked, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Marcus laughed bitterly. Oh, she knew. I made sure she knew. I asked her out 17 times that semester. 17 rejections. Each one more gentle than the last. She was kind. Even when she was breaking my heart, she did it with such grace. He reached for the red rose, turning it slowly in his fingers. The petals caught the candlelight like drops of blood. But I couldn't accept it, Marcus said. I convinced myself that if I could just prove I was worthy of her, if I could just show her what we could build together, she would change her mind. So I started working on fire suppression technology. It was her idea, actually. She mentioned once that she wished there was a way to protect electronics from fire damage without destroying the equipment with traditional suppression systems. Elena's breath caught. Her father's final project, the revolutionary fire suppression system he had been working on the night he died. The technology that had mysteriously appeared on the market months later under Marcus's name. You stole his work, Elena whispered, the pieces falling into place like dominoes. You stole my father's designs. Marcus's face crumpled. Worse than that. I sabotaged him. I was visiting Maria regularly after college, trying to convince her to leave your father and be with me. Roberto was always kind to me, he'd invite me to stay for dinner, show me his latest projects. He trusted me. And I. Marcus's voice broke. I betrayed that trust in every possible way. The dining room sounds faded to a distant hum as Elena leaned forward, her need for truth overriding her revulsion. What did you do? Marcus set down the rose with trembling hands and pulled the microSD card from his pocket again. He stared at it as if it contained his own death sentence. I installed monitoring software on your father's computers. I copied every design, every breakthrough, every innovation. But that wasn't enough. I needed his work to fail so mine could succeed. So I programmed a backdoor into his fire suppression system. A fatal flaw that would cause it to malfunction under specific conditions. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. You sabotaged the system that was protecting the warehouse. I never thought. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper now. I never thought he would be there that night. I thought the system would fail during testing, his reputation would be damaged, his investors would pull out. I thought I was destroying his business, not him. The full horror of what Marcus was telling her crashed over Elena like a wave. Her father had died because of his own technology that had been deliberately sabotaged by the man who claimed to love her mother. But they were both there, Elena said, her voice flat with shock. Both my parents were in the warehouse that night. Marcus nodded, tears now streaming openly down his face. Your mother had come to bring your father dinner. She often did that when he was working late. The surveillance footage shows them together in the main workshop when the system activated. Shows them trying to evacuate. Shows. He couldn't finish the sentence, but Elena's imagination filled in the terrible blanks. Her parents, trapped in a warehouse fire caused by sabotaged safety equipment, dying because of one man's obsessive love and wounded pride. Show me, Elena said suddenly, her voice cutting through Marcus's sobs like a blade. Show me the footage. Marcus looked up at her, his eyes wide with something approaching terror. Elena, you don't want to see. Show me. Each word was precise, controlled, carrying the weight of 12 years of unanswered questions. I've spent every day for 12 years wondering how they died. Wondering if they suffered. Wondering if they knew what was happening. I need to see. With shaking hands, Marcus retrieved his phone from his jacket pocket. The latest model, worth more than Elena made in 3 months, its pristine surface reflecting the candlelight like black mirror. He inserted the microSD card into a small adapter and pulled up a video file dated February 14, 12 years ago. The timestamp shows 11:47 p.m., Marcus said, his voice mechanical, distant. Your father was working late on the final calibrations of the suppression system. Your mother arrived at 11:52 with dinner from that little Mexican place you all loved. Rosita's. Elena's heart clenched. Rosita's had been their family tradition, takeout on Friday nights, birthdays celebrated with extra guacamole and her father's terrible jokes about how the salsa was caliente like her mother. Marcus turned the phone screen toward Elena, and she found herself staring at grainy black and white security footage of the warehouse that had been her father's pride and joy. The timestamp in the corner showed 11:52 p.m., and Elena watched a figure she recognized as her mother enter the frame, carrying a bag from Rosita's and wearing the blue coat that Elena still remembered hanging in their front closet. There, Marcus whispered, pointing to another figure bent over a workbench. There's your father. Roberto Vasquez looked exactly as Elena remembered him, methodical, careful, completely absorbed in his work. She watched him look up as her mother entered, watched his face light up with the smile that had been reserved only for his family. Watched him set down his tools and cross the workshop to embrace the woman he loved. They were so alive in the footage. So real, so present, so utterly unaware that they had less than 3 minutes left together. The system activated at 11:55, Marcus said, his voice barely audible. I had programmed it to trigger a false positive, to detect a fire that wasn't there and activate the suppression system. But instead of suppressing the fire, the sabotaged code caused the system to malfunction. The chemical suppressants, they became accelerants instead. Elena watched in horrified fascination as warning lights began flashing in the footage. She saw her parents look up in confusion, saw her father move toward the control panel, saw her mother clutch the dinner bag to her chest as if it could protect her from what was coming. And then, at exactly 11 hours 55 minutes and 33 seconds, the world exploded. The screen went white with chemical fire, and when the image cleared, Elena could see flames spreading with impossible speed across the workshop. She watched her parents, hand in hand, moving toward the exit. Watched them stumble as smoke filled the frame. Watched them fall together, still holding each other, as the warehouse became their tomb. The video ended at 11:58 p.m. 3 minutes and 5 seconds. That was how long it had taken for Marcus Ashworth's jealousy to destroy everything Elena had ever loved. Elena stared at the blank phone screen, feeling something fundamental break inside her chest. Not her heart, something deeper than that. Something that connected her to faith, to hope, to the belief that the universe had any kind of meaningful order. "They died holding hands," she whispered, the words falling from her lips like prayer. "Yes," Marcus said. The coroner said they never let go of each other. Even at the end. Elena looked up at Marcus, and for the first time since sitting down at table 47, she really saw him. Not the wealthy tech mogul, not the reclusive billionaire, not even the man who had killed her parents. She saw a human being who had been carrying this burden for 12 years, who had built an empire on the ashes of the family he destroyed, who celebrated every success alone because he knew he didn't deserve companionship, who grew roses from her mother's seeds because it was the only way he knew to honor what he had taken. "You've been living with this," Elena said. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded. "Every day. Every success, every dollar, every moment of my life has been built on what I did to them. To you. I destroyed your family, Elena. I orphaned you. And then I got rich from the technology that killed them." Elena felt a strange calm settling over her, as if she had finally found the eye of a storm that had been raging inside her for 12 years. The truth was horrible, unthinkable, devastating, but it was also, finally, complete. "The pills," she said, understanding. "You take pills to forget." "I tried," Marcus said. "God, how I tried to forget. But the medication, it's destroying my liver, my memory, my ability to function. And lately, it's not working anymore. The memories keep breaking through. Your mother's face. Your father's kindness. The sound they made when." He couldn't finish, but Elena understood. Marcus Ashworth was dying, slowly, deliberately, methodically destroying himself with guilt and prescription medication because he couldn't live with what he had done. "Why now?" Elena asked. "Why tell me now?" Marcus looked at her with those impossible, mismatched eyes, eyes that Sophia shared, Elena realized with a start. Eyes that belonged to a family line she was only beginning to understand. "Because," Marcus said simply, "I'm dying. And because you deserve to know the truth before I die with it." Elena stared at him, processing this final revelation. Marcus Ashworth, the man who had killed her parents, the man who had built a fortune on their graves, was dying. And he had chosen to confess to her, their daughter, in the same restaurant that had been built with blood money from their deaths. The irony was so complete, so perfect in its tragic symmetry, that Elena almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she reached across the table and, for reasons she couldn't fully explain, gently touched Marcus's trembling hand. "Tell me the rest," she said quietly. "Tell me everything." Marcus stared at Elena's hand covering his, the simple human contact seeming to shock him more than his own confession had. In the warm amber light of the restaurant, Elena could see the full extent of his deterioration, the yellowed cast to his skin that spoke of liver damage, the tremor in his hands that had nothing to do with nerves, the hollowness in his cheeks that came from months of barely eating. "There's more," Marcus whispered, his voice hoarse. "So much more that you need to know." As if summoned by some invisible signal, Thomas Chin appeared at their table carrying a leather portfolio and a fresh bottle of water. Elena noticed how smoothly he moved, how his eyes continuously scanned the dining room, how he positioned himself to block their conversation from curious onlookers at nearby tables. "Mr. Ashworth," Thomas said quietly, setting the water down with practiced efficiency. "I believe it's time." Elena looked between the two men, confusion adding another layer to her already overwhelmed emotions. "Time for what?" "Thomas, what's going on?" Thomas Chen, whom she had known for 3 years as nothing more than the restaurant's head chef, pulled out the chair beside Elena and sat down with the authority of someone revealing their true nature. When he spoke, his voice carried the measured cadence of someone accustomed to delivering difficult truths. "My name isn't Thomas Chen," he said simply. "It's Detective Tom Chen, Denver Police Department. Ray Morales' former partner. And for the past 5 years, I've been working undercover, waiting for this moment." Elena felt the world tilt again, reality reshaping itself around revelations that came like hammer blows. "You're a police detective. But you're the head chef." "I'm a detective who happens to be an excellent cook," Tom said with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "My family owned restaurants for 3 generations before I joined the force. When Ray's investigation was shut down and he was forced into retirement, we knew we needed a different approach." Marcus reached for his water with shaking hands, the simple act of lifting the glass requiring visible effort. "Tom has been documenting my visits here for 5 years. Every confession I've made to an empty chair. Every detail I've revealed during my episodes." "Episodes?" Elena asked. Tom opened the leather portfolio, revealing hundreds of photographs, audio transcripts, and detailed notes. "Mr. Ashworth's medication-induced memory fragmentation has caused him to relive certain events repeatedly. Every New Year's Eve for the past 5 years, he's come here and confessed to that rose, believing it was your mother. We've recorded everything." Elena stared at the portfolio, her mind struggling to process the implications. You've known for 5 years that he killed my parents, and you never." "We needed him to remember clearly," Tom said gently. "His confessions during the episodes were fragmented, confused. Legally, they wouldn't have held up in court. The medication made his memory unreliable. But tonight his system has finally metabolized enough of the drugs to allow clear recollection." Marcus laughed bitterly, a sound like breaking glass. "Ironic, isn't it? The pills I took to forget have finally worn off enough to let me remember everything. And the liver damage they've caused means I have perhaps 6 months to live." Elena looked at the evidence spread before her, photographs of Marcus talking to the empty chair across from him, transcripts of his drug-addled confessions, medical records documenting his declining health. The scope of the operation was staggering. "Ray knew," Elena said, understanding dawning. "Detective Morales knew you were still investigating." Tom nodded. "Ray never stopped caring about your family's case. When he was forced to retire, he reached out to me through unofficial channels. We've been building a case that federal authorities couldn't suppress or classify." "But there's something else," Marcus said, his voice growing weaker. "Something about your adoption of Sophia. Something that connects all of this in ways you can't imagine." Elena's blood turned to ice water. "What about Sophia?" Marcus reached into his jacket and withdrew a manila envelope, yellowed with age and sealed with wax. "This letter was written by my sister Carmen, 3 days before she died in that car accident. She gave it to her lawyer with instructions to deliver it only if something happened to her. Carmen was Sophia's birth mother," Elena whispered, pieces of an impossible puzzle clicking into place. "Carmen was my sister," Marcus confirmed. "And Sophia? Sophia is my biological niece. She carries the family heterochromia that I inherited from our grandmother." Elena felt the world spinning around her. Sophia's mismatched eyes, the strange recognition she had always felt when looking at Marcus, the familiarity that danced just beyond conscious thought. "But that means... It means you've been raising the daughter of the family that destroyed yours," Marcus finished. Carmen discovered my role in the warehouse fire 3 years ago. She was going to expose me, going to take Sophia and disappear. But she died in a car accident before she could reveal the truth. Tom leaned forward, his expression grave. The car accident that killed Carmen wasn't an accident, Elena. Our investigation has uncovered evidence that it was arranged to keep her quiet. Elena stared at the sealed envelope in Marcus's hands, afraid to touch it, afraid to know what Carmen had written. You had your own sister killed. No, Marcus said emphatically, then his voice cracked. But I might as well have. My business partner, James Morrison, discovered that Carmen was threatening to expose our company. He took preventative measures. Without my knowledge, but using resources I had provided him. The revelations were coming too fast, each one more devastating than the last. Elena felt as if she were drowning in truth, gasping for air in a world where everything she thought she knew was being systematically destroyed. Open it, Elena said, nodding toward the envelope. Open Carmen's letter. With trembling hands, Marcus broke the wax seal and withdrew several sheets of handwritten paper. His voice was barely a whisper as he began to read, "If you are reading this, then I am dead, and my fears about my brother have been confirmed. Marcus Ashworth is not the man the world believes him to be. He is a killer, a thief, and a man so consumed by obsession that he destroyed an innocent family to satisfy his wounded pride. 3 years ago, I discovered the truth about the warehouse fire that killed Roberto and Maria Vasquez. I found the original security footage, the sabotaged code, the evidence of Marcus's crime. But more than that, I discovered the depth of his sickness. For 20 years, he has been obsessed with Maria Vasquez. Her rejection broke something fundamental inside him, and rather than healing, he allowed that wound to fester into something monstrous. I have taken Sophia and fled because I cannot allow my daughter to be raised in the shadow of such evil. But if something happens to me, if Marcus or his associates discover my plans and silence me, then I pray this letter finds its way to Elena Vasquez, Roberto and Maria's daughter. Elena, if you are reading this, then Sophia is in your care, and you deserve to know the truth about her parentage. Sophia is Marcus's niece, but she is also innocent of his sins. Love her, protect her, and help her understand that the crimes of her uncle do not define her worth. But there is something else you must know. Something that will help you bring Marcus to justice and prevent him from destroying any other families. Hidden in the meditation garden behind his Aspen estate, beneath the koi pond, are the original hard drives from your parents' computer systems. Marcus stole not just their fire suppression technology, but years of other innovations. The drives contain proof of theft, sabotage, and premeditated murder. More importantly, they contain your father's final message. Roberto Vasquez was a careful man, and when he began to suspect that someone was stealing his work, he started keeping detailed records. His final video log, recorded the night he died, names Marcus as his suspected saboteur. Your father knew, Elena. In his final hours, he knew who was destroying his life's work. Find the drives. Expose the truth. And know that Sophia is a gift, the one good thing to come from this tragedy. She carries the best of both families in her genes and in her heart. Justice delayed is not justice denied. The truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep it's buried. With love and regret, Carmen Ashworth. The letter ended, but the silence that followed felt infinite. Elena sat motionless, processing the magnitude of what Carmen had revealed. Sophia wasn't just an adopted daughter, she was the key to everything. The biological link between families, the innocent child born from guilty blood, the living bridge between destruction and redemption. The drives, Elena whispered. Are they still there? Tom nodded, pulling out a small device that looked like a GPS tracker. We've had surveillance on Marcus's property for 18 months. The koi pond was installed directly over the location where the original warehouse foundation was poured. The drives are there, sealed in waterproof containers. Marcus's face had gone gray, his breathing shallow and labored. I never knew, he whispered. About the final video log. About Roberto suspecting me. I thought I had covered everything. Elena looked at this man who had shaped her life in such devastating ways, who had killed her parents, orphaned her, then unknowingly placed his own niece into her care. The cosmic justice of it was so complete, so elegantly brutal, that it took her breath away. He knew, Elena said, understanding finally hitting her. My father knew you were going to kill him, and he made sure to leave evidence behind. Evidence that's been waiting 12 years for the right moment, Tom said. Evidence that, combined with Marcus's confession tonight and the witness testimony we've gathered, will finally bring justice for your family. Elena reached across the table and gently took Marcus's hand again. He looked up at her with those haunting mismatched eyes, eyes that Sophia shared, eyes that would forever connect them across a chasm of pain and blood. There's something I need to tell you about Sophia, Elena said quietly. Something you deserve to know before this ends. Marcus waited, his breathing labored but his attention complete. She's brilliant, Elena said. Just like my mother was. Just like my father was. She has your family's eyes, but she has their minds. She builds circuits out of household objects, fixes broken electronics by instinct, and dreams of becoming an engineer just like the grandparents she never met. Marcus closed his eyes, tears streaming down his ruined face. She's everything good that could have come from our families, he whispered. Everything I destroyed, reborn in her. Elena nodded. And she's going to grow up knowing the truth about all of it. The good and the bad. The love and the loss. But she's going to grow up free from the weight of your choices, because tonight we finally put the past to rest. As if on cue, the restaurant's sound system began playing Auld Lang Syne, and Elena realized that midnight was approaching. The new year was coming, bringing with it the promise of justice long delayed but finally delivered. The truth had indeed surfaced, just as Carmen had predicted. And sitting at table 47, surrounded by evidence of crimes and confessions, holding the hand of her parents' killer while planning to raise his innocent niece, Elena Vasquez understood that justice sometimes looked very different from revenge. Sometimes, it looked like mercy. And sometimes, mercy was the most powerful form of justice of all. The countdown to midnight had begun in the dining room around them, wealthy voices calling out numbers in champagne-soaked celebration, crystal glasses raised toward the chandelier's golden glow, couples embracing as the final seconds of the old year ticked away. But at table 47, time moved differently. Here, in this corner alcove overlooking the roaring Fork Valley, the past and present were finally converging with the weight of an avalanche. 10, 9, 8. The voices rose around them like a tide. Marcus Ashworth sat slumped in his chair, the confession having drained what little strength the dying man possessed. His hands shook not just from medication withdrawal now, but from the magnitude of what he was about to face. For 12 years, he had lived with guilt, but guilt had been private, manageable with pills and isolation. Justice would be public, permanent, and utterly without mercy. 7, 6, 5. Elena stared at the evidence spread across their table. Carmen's letter, the photographs, Tom Chen's meticulous documentation, the micro SD card that contained her parents' final moments. Everything she had searched for, everything she had dreamed of finding during those endless nights of research and investigation, lay before her like pieces of a puzzle finally complete. 4, 3, 2. Tom Chen's radio crackled softly with static, and Elena realized that other officers were positioned throughout the restaurant, waiting for his signal. This had all been planned, orchestrated, timed to culminate at the moment when Marcus's memory was clearest and his confession most complete. 1. Happy New Year. As fireworks exploded outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the snow-covered peaks in brilliant colors, Elena made a decision that surprised even her. Instead of signaling for Marcus's immediate arrest, instead of watching him be dragged away in handcuffs as she had dreamed for 12 years, she leaned forward and spoke quietly. "I want to see it," she said. "I want to see the place where they died. I want to see what you built on top of their graves." Marcus looked up at her with confusion clouding his pain-glazed eyes. "Elena, you don't understand. If we leave here, if we go to my property, there's no guarantee. My business partner, James Morrison, he's been monitoring my activities. If he realizes I've confessed, then we'd better move quickly," Tom Chen said, closing his portfolio and standing with the fluid efficiency of someone who had been preparing for this moment for years. "My backup team is already in position around your estate, Marcus. Morrison won't be a problem." Elena felt a strange calm settling over her as she rose from the table. The red rose remained where Marcus had placed it, a final offering to her mother's memory. Without thinking, Elena reached across the table and picked up the flower, its petals soft as silk between her fingers. "For Sophia," she said simply. "So she understands where she came from. All of it." The drive through Aspen's winding mountain roads passed in surreal silence. Elena sat in the passenger seat of Tom's unmarked police vehicle, while Marcus rode in the back, flanked by two plainclothes officers who had materialized from the restaurant's shadows. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the world crystal clear under a full moon that turned everything silver and stark. Marcus's estate occupied a private valley 15 minutes from the restaurant. A sprawling complex of glass and steel that seemed to grow directly from the mountainside. Solar panels glinted like scales on the roof, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of wilderness that would never be developed, never be touched by human hands. It was the home of someone with unlimited resources and no one to share them with. $47 million, Marcus said quietly as they pulled through security gates that opened at their approach. "I spent $47 million building this place, and I've never had a single dinner guest. Never hosted a party. Never shared a conversation in the living room." Elena stared at the house as it grew larger through the windshield. "You built a mausoleum." "I built a prison," Marcus corrected. "And I've been serving a life sentence in it for 12 years. The meditation garden lay behind the main house, accessible through a stone pathway that wound between carefully manicured trees and sculptured boulders. Motion-activated lights illuminated their approach, revealing a space designed for contemplation and peace, the kind of Zen sanctuary that only unlimited money could create. But Elena felt nothing peaceful about this place. Knowing what lay beneath the carefully arranged stones, knowing that her parents' final resting place had been turned into someone's personal retreat, made her stomach turn with revulsion. The koi pond occupied the center of the garden, its dark water reflecting the moon like a black mirror. Orange and gold fish moved languidly through the depths, completely oblivious to the human drama unfolding around them. "There," Marcus said, pointing to a specific section where a small wooden bridge crossed the pond's narrowest point. Carmen was right. The drives are directly beneath that bridge, sealed in containers I placed there 5 years ago. Tom Chen was already pulling specialized equipment from a waterproof case, underwater metal detectors, diving lights, waterproof containers for evidence. But Elena found herself transfixed by something else entirely. Along the pond's eastern edge, a small garden of red roses grew in perfect rows, their blooms impossibly vibrant against the snow-dusted ground. These were the source of Marcus's ritual flowers, dozens of roses grown from seeds that had been in her mother's purse the night she died. "You've been growing a garden from her belongings," Elena said, understanding finally hitting her. "For 12 years, you've been tending roses that came from her purse." Marcus nodded, his breath visible in the cold mountain air. It was all I had left of her. The only connection I could maintain without destroying it with my touch. Elena walked to the rose garden and knelt among the flowers. Even in winter, even in the thin air of the mountains, they bloomed with a vitality that seemed supernatural. Her mother had always loved roses, had grown them in coffee cans on the fire escape of their small apartment, had filled their home with their scent whenever she could afford fresh flowers from the grocery store. "She would have hated this," Elena said quietly. "She would have hated that you turned her death into your obsession. That you made her memory into another possession you could control." Behind her, she heard the splash of Tom Chen entering the pond, heard the whir of electronic equipment as he searched for the hidden drives. But Elena remained focused on the roses, on the impossible beauty that had grown from such ugly beginnings. "Elena," Marcus said, his voice barely audible. "There's something else I need to tell you. About Sophia. About why Carmen was so desperate to get her away from me." Elena turned to face him, still kneeling among the roses. What else could there possibly be? Marcus reached into his jacket with trembling hands and withdrew a sealed envelope, smaller than Carmen's letter but bearing the same sense of desperate urgency. "This is Sophia's birth certificate. The real one. The one that Carmen hid from everyone, including Sophia's adoptive services." With growing dread, Elena took the envelope and tore it open. Inside was an official birth certificate for Sophia Ashworth, born 3 years after Carmen's supposed death, listing Carmen Ashworth as the mother and... Elena's blood turned to ice as she read the father's name. Roberto Vasquez Jr. "That's impossible," Elena whispered. "My father died 12 years ago. Sophia is only 8 years old." Marcus's face crumpled with fresh anguish. "Your father had a brother. Roberto Jr., named after his father. He was 15 years younger than your father, worked as a contractor in Denver. Carmen met him 4 years ago, when she was running from me, trying to start a new life." Elena stared at the birth certificate, the implications hitting her like physical blows. "Sophia isn't your niece. She's my cousin. My father's niece. Roberto Jr. was killed in a construction accident when Sophia was 2 years old," Marcus continued. "Carmen never told him about Sophia's biological connection to the Vasquez family. She was terrified that if anyone discovered the truth, if anyone realized that Sophia was Roberto Vasquez's biological niece, I would become obsessed with her the way I had been obsessed with your mother." The roses around Elena seemed to pulse with new significance. Sophia wasn't just an innocent child caught between families, she was a Vasquez. She carried Elena's blood, her parents' legacy, her father's genetic brilliance. She was the daughter that Roberto and Maria Vasquez had never had the chance to meet. "Carmen was protecting her from you," Elena said, understanding flooding through her. "She knew you would see Sophia as another way to possess my family." "And she was right," Marcus whispered. "When I found out about Sophia's parentage, when I realized she was connected to your family, I did become obsessed. I started having her followed, started researching her adoptive mother, started planning ways to to insert myself into her life. Elena felt rage building inside her chest, hot and pure and cleansing. Not just for her parents anymore, but for Sophia. For the innocent child who had been stalked by her own supposed uncle, who had been treated like a possession to be claimed rather than a human being to be loved. "You've been watching her," Elena said, her voice deadly quiet. "You've been watching my daughter." "Private investigators," Marcus admitted. "For 3 years. Photos, school reports, medical records. I know about her electronics projects, her dreams of becoming an engineer, her nightmares about parents she never met but somehow remembers in her genes." Elena rose from among the roses, the red flower from the restaurant still clutched in her hand. For 12 years, she had dreamed of this moment, the moment when she would face her parents' killer and extract the justice that had been denied. But now, standing in this carefully manicured garden built on their graves, holding evidence of Marcus's systematic stalking of Sophia, Elena realized that simple justice wasn't enough. This required something more complete. Something that would ensure Sophia never had to live in the shadow of Marcus Ashworth's obsessions. "Tom," Elena called to the detective still searching the pond. "I need you to call Detective Morales. Tell him it's time for the final phase." Tom looked up from his equipment, water dripping from his wetsuit. "Final phase?" Elena turned to Marcus, who was watching her with the resigned acceptance of someone who finally understood that his reckoning had come. "We're not just arresting you for my parents' murder. We're exposing everything. The stalking, the corruption, the cover-up. Your business partner James Morrison, the federal officials who suppressed the investigation, everyone who helped you escape justice for 12 years. Marcus nodded slowly. "You're going to destroy my entire empire. I'm going to make sure that Sophia grows up in a world where your money can't touch her," Elena corrected. "Where your obsessions can't follow her. Where the name Ashworth becomes a cautionary tale instead of a source of power." The sound of Tom's equipment suddenly changed pitch, indicating a discovery. "Got them," he called from the pond. 3 sealed containers, exactly where Carmen said they'd be. As Tom began the careful process of retrieving her father's hidden evidence, Elena looked around the meditation garden one final time. Tomorrow, this place would be crawling with federal investigators. The roses would be tagged as evidence, the koi pond drained and searched, the carefully constructed piece shattered by the machinery of justice. But tonight, for just a few more hours, it remained Marcus Ashworth's prison. And Elena Vasquez finally understood that the most complete revenge wasn't destroying her enemy, it was freeing herself from the need for revenge at all. "The new year," Elena said quietly, watching her breath mist in the cold mountain air. "It's going to be different for all of us." Marcus nodded, his face gray with exhaustion and resignation. "For Sophia most of all. She deserves better than the legacy I would have left her." Elena looked at the red rose in her hand, its petals now slightly wilted from the cold but still beautiful, still carrying the essence of her mother's memory. Tomorrow, she would give it to Sophia and tell her the truth about her heritage, all of it. The love and the loss, the brilliance and the betrayal, the way families could be broken and remade in unexpected ways. But tonight, Elena Vasquez stood in a garden grown from tragedy and felt, for the first time in 12 years, the possibility of peace. Justice was coming. But more importantly, healing had finally begun. The news broke at 6 a.m. Mountain Time, rippling outward from Aspen like shockwaves from an earthquake. By 7, it had reached Denver's major networks. By 8, it was trending nationally. By noon, Ashworth Industries' scandal was dominating social media feeds across the country. Elena sat in the waiting room of the Pitkin County Sheriff's Department, Sophia curled against her side, both of them watching the coverage unfold on the television mounted in the corner. The 8-year-old had taken the revelations about her parentage with the remarkable resilience that children often display when faced with truths too large for adult comprehension. "So my real daddy was your daddy's brother?" Sophia had asked that morning, her mismatched eyes, those impossible Ashworth eyes, studying Elena's face with careful attention. "Yes, mi amor. Which means we were always family, even before I adopted you. We just didn't know it yet. And the man who hurt Abuela Maria and Abuelo Roberto, he's sick in his heart." Elena had paused at that, struck by Sophia's intuitive understanding of Marcus's psychological state. "Yes. Very sick. And he's going to face consequences for what he did." Now, as they waited for Detective Morales to finish processing Marcus's formal confession, Elena watched the story unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and surreal disbelief. The media had latched onto every element of the case: the star-crossed college romance, the sabotage technology, the warehouse fire, the 12-year cover-up, the dying confession in an exclusive restaurant. But what captivated the public imagination most was the human element at the story's heart: the waitress who had unknowingly been serving her parents' killer while raising his victim's granddaughter. "Local woman discovers truth about parents' death while serving killer's table," read the headline on Channel 7. Tech billionaire's 12-year secret exposed by victim's daughter. Elena's phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, producers, and lawyers. She had turned off the ringer hours ago, but the steady vibration against her leg served as a constant reminder that their private tragedy had become public property. "Miss Vasquez?" A young woman in a business suit approached them, her press credentials visible from across the room. "I'm Jennifer Walsh from 60 Minutes. I was wondering if we could schedule an interview." "No," Elena said firmly, not taking her eyes off the television. "Not today. Not yet." The reporter persisted. "The public is fascinated by your story. The way you've maintained such dignity throughout this ordeal, the fact that you're raising his victim's granddaughter, it's incredibly compelling." Sophia looked up at Elena with those haunting eyes. "Mama, what's compelling?" "It means people want to hear our story, baby. But some stories need time to settle before they're ready to be shared." The reporter finally retreated, but Elena knew she wouldn't be the last. This story had everything the media loved: wealth, murder, family secrets, poetic justice. They would be pursued for months, maybe years, by people wanting to package their pain into entertainment. Detective Ray Morales emerged from the back offices, looking older than his 52 years but somehow lighter, as if a weight he had carried for 12 years had finally been lifted. Behind him walked Tom Chen, still wearing his chef's apron despite having revealed his true identity as an undercover detective. "Elena," Ray said, settling into the chair across from them with visible relief. "It's over. Marcus signed a full confession to the murders of your parents, to the technology theft, to conspiracy to obstruct justice. James Morrison has been arrested in Denver on charges of conspiracy to commit murder for Carmen's death. The federal officials who suppressed our original investigation are facing internal review." Sophia listened to the adult conversation with the serious attention of a child who had learned early that the world held both wonder and terrible secrets. "What happens to the sick man now?" she asked. Ray exchanged a glance with Elena before answering. "He's going to go to a special hospital where they can take care of his sickness while he waits for his trial. And he's going to make sure that all the money he made from hurting your grandparents goes to help other families." Elena had insisted on this part of the confession agreement. Marcus's personal fortune, estimated at $2.3 billion, would be placed in a trust fund dedicated to fire safety research and victim compensation. Sophia would receive a portion when she turned 18, but the majority would fund scholarships for engineering students, support for families affected by corporate negligence, and research into preventing industrial accidents. He wanted to give you more, Ray continued quietly. He wanted to deed his entire estate to Sophia, make her his sole heir. But I told him that would be another kind of violation. Another way of making your family possess something they never asked for. Elena nodded. Marcus's guilt-driven generosity would have been just another form of possession, another way for his obsession to extend beyond his death. Sophia deserved her inheritance from the Vasquez side of her family, the legacy of integrity, hard work, and love that Roberto and Maria had built through their lives. What about the restaurant? Sophia asked. The place where Mama works. Tong Chen smiled, the first genuine expression Elena had seen from him since his cover had been blown. The Alpine Crown was built with insurance money from the warehouse fire. Now that we've exposed the fraud, the insurance company is demanding full restitution. The restaurant will likely close within the month. Elena felt a strange pang at this news. The Alpine Crown had been her workplace for 3 years, the source of income that had kept her and Sophia housed and fed while she studied for her law degree. But she couldn't mourn the closure of a business built on her parents' graves. Actually, Ray said, pulling out another manila envelope, there's something else you need to know about that. The original Vasquez Electronics warehouse was heavily insured. When your parents died, the insurance company paid out the claim, but there was no surviving heir to receive the settlement. The money has been sitting in an escrow account for 12 years, accumulating interest. Elena stared at the envelope. How much money? $750,000, Ray said quietly. Your parents' life insurance, the business insurance, and 12 years of compound interest. It's yours, Elena. It was always yours. The number hit Elena like a physical blow. More money than she had ever imagined having, money that could pay off her student loans, buy a house for her and Sophia, ensure that her daughter's college education would be fully funded. Money that came from her parents' death but could create life for their survivors. Sophia looked up at her with those remarkable eyes. Mama, are we rich now? Elena pulled her daughter closer, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. We were always rich, baby. We just measured it differently. As they left the sheriff's department, Elena was struck by how normal the world looked despite everything that had changed. The mountains still rose majestically against the winter sky, snow still fell in gentle flakes, people still went about their daily business as if the revelation of a 12-year-old murder was just another news story to be consumed and forgotten. But for Elena, everything had transformed. She was no longer the struggling waitress working triple shifts to make ends meet. She was no longer the orphan daughter searching desperately for answers about her parents' death. She was no longer the single mother terrified that she couldn't provide adequately for her adopted child. She was Elena Vasquez, daughter of Roberto and Maria, cousin and guardian to Sophia, heir to a legacy of integrity that no amount of money could purchase and no amount of tragedy could destroy. The phone calls continued throughout the afternoon. Publishers wanting to buy the rights to their story. Hollywood producers interested in film adaptations. Journalists seeking exclusive interviews. Each call represented an opportunity to profit from their pain, to transform their tragedy into entertainment for strangers. Elena declined them all. That evening, as Sophia worked on a science project at their kitchen table, building a simple circuit board with the same intuitive brilliance that had made her grandfather famous, Elena sat reviewing acceptance letters from law schools across the country. Harvard, Yale, Stanford. Institutions that had seemed impossibly out of reach just 24 hours ago were now offering her full scholarships, eager to associate themselves with the woman who had brought down one of tech industry's most powerful figures. "Which one, Mama?" Sophia asked, looking up from her circuit board. "Which school do you want to go to?" Elena studied the letters, each one representing a different future, a different path toward the justice career she had always dreamed of pursuing. But her eyes kept returning to one particular envelope, the University of Colorado School of Law, where her parents had met, where their love story had begun before Marcus Ashworth's obsession had twisted it into tragedy. "I think," Elena said slowly, "we're going home. To Denver. Where your grandparents lived and worked and loved each other." Sophia smiled, her mismatched eyes bright with approval. "Will we visit their graves?" "Every week," Elena promised. "And we'll tell them about your science projects, and about how you're going to be an engineer just like Abuelo Roberto. And we'll bring them roses, but these will be roses we grow ourselves, in our own garden, with love instead of guilt." As night fell over Aspen, Elena stood at their apartment window watching the lights twinkle across the valley. Tomorrow, they would begin the process of leaving this place where she had worked so hard and learned so much. Tomorrow, they would start planning their return to Denver, where Sophia could grow up knowing her true heritage, where Elena could complete her law degree, where they could build a life that honored the past while embracing the future. But tonight, Elena held her daughter close and felt the deep satisfaction that came from knowing that justice, though delayed, had finally been served. The ripples of Marcus Ashworth's confession would continue to spread, affecting investors who had profited from stolen technology, federal officials who had participated in the cover-up, corporate executives who had enabled years of corruption. But the most important ripple was the simplest one. A little girl with mismatched eyes would grow up knowing she was loved, knowing she was wanted, knowing that she carried the best of two families in her genes and her heart. And Elena Vasquez, daughter of Roberto and Maria, guardian of Sophia, seeker of truth and justice, finally understood that some stories don't end with revenge or punishment or even redemption. Sometimes, the best stories end with love. 1 year later the morning sun streamed through the windows of the modest house on Maple Street in Denver, casting golden rectangles across the hardwood floors that Elena and Sophia had refinished themselves over the summer. It wasn't a mansion, wasn't even close to the luxury they could have afforded with Elena's inheritance, but it was theirs. Every creaking floorboard, every painted wall, every carefully tended rose bush in the back garden bore the mark of their own hands, their own choices, their own love. Elena stood in the kitchen, wearing her University of Colorado Law School sweatshirt, reviewing notes for her criminal justice reform seminar while Sophia sat at the breakfast table working on her latest invention, a smoke detector that could differentiate between cooking accidents and actual fires, preventing false alarms that might delay real emergency responses. At 9 years old, Sophia Vasquez had already been featured in 3 engineering magazines and had won the Colorado State Science Fair with a project on improving fire suppression systems in residential buildings. The irony wasn't lost on Elena that her daughter, granddaughter of Roberto Vasquez, niece of Marcus Ashworth, had chosen to dedicate her remarkable mind to the very technology that had destroyed and connected their families. "Mama," Sophia said, not looking up from her circuit board, "Mrs. Patterson from Channel 7 called again. She wants to do another interview about the anniversary." Elena sighed, stirring honey into her coffee. The media attention had never fully died down, though it had evolved from sensationalism to something approaching genuine journalism. The case had sparked congressional hearings on corporate accountability, federal investigations into technology theft, and academic studies on the psychological profiles of obsessive criminals. Elena had testified before 3 congressional committees and 2 federal grand juries, her story becoming a catalyst for broader reforms in how industrial accidents were investigated. "What did you tell her?" "I told her what you taught me to say," Sophia replied with a slight smile. "That our story belongs to us, and we share it when we choose to, not when other people want to consume it." Elena felt a surge of pride at her daughter's wisdom. Sophia had inherited more than just the Vasquez intelligence. She had developed an intuitive understanding of privacy, dignity, and the difference between justice and exploitation. The doorbell rang, and Elena glanced at the clock. 8:30 in the morning, too early for reporters, too late for deliveries. Through the front window, she could see a familiar figure standing on their porch. Detective Ray Morales, now serving as director of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation's Cold Case Division, held a manila envelope and wore the expression of someone bearing significant news. "Uncle Ray." Sophia called out as Elena opened the door. She had adopted him as family over the past year, one of several surrogate relatives who had emerged from the investigation to help fill the gaps left by tragedy. "Morning, Sophia." "Elena." Ray stepped into their living room, his eyes taking in the family photos that covered the mantel, pictures of Roberto and Maria Vasquez, graduation photos from Elena's first year of law school, snapshots of Sophia's science fair victories, candid moments of their new life together. "Coffee?" Elena offered, but Ray shook his head. "This is official business, I'm afraid." "But good official business." He opened the envelope and withdrew a thick legal document. The Federal Appeals Court handed down their final decision yesterday. Marcus Ashworth's conviction has been upheld, his appeals exhausted. He'll serve the remainder of his sentence in the federal medical facility in Colorado. Elena felt a complex mixture of emotions at this news. Marcus had been sentenced to 25 years for the murders of her parents, conspiracy charges, and technology theft. Given his deteriorating health from years of prescription drug abuse, it was effectively a life sentence. But there had always been the possibility that expensive lawyers might find a way to reduce his punishment or secure his release. "How much time does he have left?" Elena asked quietly. "His doctors estimate 6 to 8 months, Ray said gently. "The liver damage is too extensive for transplant eligibility, and he's refused aggressive treatment. He says he's ready to face whatever comes next." Sophia looked up from her project, her mismatched eyes serious. "Is he still the sick man? Or is he getting better?" Ray considered the question with the careful attention he always gave to Sophia's inquiries. "I think he's found a kind of peace, honey. He spends most of his time writing letters to families of people hurt by corporate negligence, donating money to engineering scholarships, working with researchers on fire safety technology. It doesn't undo what he did, but it's something." Elena nodded. Over the past year, she had received dozens of letters from Marcus, not requesting forgiveness, not seeking absolution, but simply documenting his efforts to create something positive from the wreckage of his choices. She had never responded to the letters, but she had kept them. Sophia would read them someday, when she was old enough to understand the full complexity of redemption and consequence. "There's something else," Ray continued, producing a second document from his envelope. "Marcus has requested a meeting. With both of you. Before he dies," Elena finished. "Yes. It would be completely voluntary, of course. And it would take place at the federal facility, with full security and counseling support. But he says there are things he wants Sophia to know about her heritage, both sides of her heritage, before it's too late." Elena looked at her daughter, who had stopped working on her project and was listening with the complete attention of someone who understood that adult decisions were being made that would affect her future. "What do you think, mi amor?" Elena asked. Do you want to meet him? Sophia was quiet for a long moment, her young mind working through implications that would challenge philosophers. Finally, she spoke with the clarity that never ceased to amaze Elena. I think people are more complicated than good or bad. Uncle Ray told me that the sick man helped invent things that save people from fires now. And you told me that he loved Abuela Maria, even though he loved her in a sick way that hurt people. And Mama Carmen's letters say that he has the same eyes as me, which means we have the same great-grandmother. Elena felt her throat tighten. Sophia had read Carmen's letters on her 8th birthday, processing the complex family history with remarkable maturity. I want to meet him, Sophia continued. Not because I forgive him, because I don't think children should have to forgive grown-ups for hurting other grown-ups. But because he's part of my story, and I want to understand all the parts of my story. Ray smiled. You know, Sophia, you're going to make an extraordinary lawyer someday. I'm going to be an engineer, Sophia corrected firmly. Like Abuelo Roberto. But I'm going to understand the law too, so I can make sure that people who create dangerous things have to take responsibility for them. Elena felt a wave of pride so strong it was almost physical. This child, this brilliant, thoughtful, remarkable child, had taken the tragedy that defined her origins and transformed it into a mission for preventing future tragedies. We'll go, Elena said finally. But we go together, and we leave when we choose to leave. Ray nodded. I'll make the arrangements. And Elena, there's one more thing you should know. The Vasquez Electronics Memorial Foundation officially opened last week. The building is beautiful, state-of-the-art research facilities, a full scholarship program, and a memorial garden with roses grown from the same seeds that your mother carried. Elena had helped design the foundation during her second semester of law school, working with architects and engineers to create a facility that would honor her parents' legacy while advancing the kind of innovative, ethical technology they had devoted their lives to developing. Marcus's fortune had funded the construction, but the vision was entirely Elena's. Can we visit this weekend? Sophia asked eagerly. I want to see if my new smoke detector design might work for their research program. Of course, Elena said, ruffling her daughter's dark hair. But first, you need to finish your homework. And I need to complete my reading for constitutional law. As Ray prepared to leave, Elena walked him to the door. The morning sun had grown stronger, melting the frost from their front yard and revealing the green shoots of spring bulbs Elena and Sophia had planted in October. Ray, Elena said quietly, do you think we're doing the right thing? Meeting with him? I think, Ray said carefully, that you and Sophia have handled every impossible decision this past year with wisdom and grace. I trust your judgment. And I think Roberto and Maria would be proud of the women you've both become. After Ray left, Elena returned to the kitchen to find Sophia had abandoned her science project in favor of studying a framed photograph of Roberto and Maria's wedding day. The same photograph Elena had treasured through years of poverty and uncertainty, now displayed prominently on their kitchen counter. They look happy, Sophia said simply. They were, Elena confirmed. Even when things were difficult, even when money was tight, even when your grandfather was working 18-hour days trying to perfect his inventions, they were happy. Because they had each other, and they had purpose, and they had love. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. That's what we have now, isn't it? Each other and purpose and love. Elena pulled her daughter into a hug, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood wonder. Yes, mi amor. That's exactly what we have. As they prepared for school and work, Elena would attend classes in the morning and work at a legal aid clinic in the afternoon, while Sophia would spend the day at a specialized program for academically gifted children. Elena reflected on how profoundly their lives had changed in just 1 year. The money from her parents' estate had provided security, but not excess. Elena had invested most of it in education, both her law degree and Sophia's future college expenses, while using enough to buy their modest house and ensure they never again faced the daily anxiety of choosing between necessities. More importantly, the truth about her parents' deaths had freed Elena from the consuming need for answers that had driven her for 12 years. She no longer spent sleepless nights researching corporate connections or following paper trails through shell companies. Instead, she channeled that investigative energy into her legal studies, specializing in corporate accountability and victims' rights. Sophia had blossomed in ways that amazed everyone who knew her. Free from the uncertainty that had marked her early years, secure in the knowledge that she was wanted and loved and understood, she had developed not just intellectually but emotionally. She laughed more easily, trusted more readily, and dreamed more boldly than Elena had ever dared hope. But perhaps the most significant change was the hardest to quantify. Elena no longer felt like a woman defined by loss. She was no longer Roberto and Maria's orphan daughter, no longer the struggling single mother working impossible hours to survive, no longer the seeker of justice for crimes that seemed destined to remain hidden. She was Elena Vasquez, law student and advocate, mother and guardian, a woman building a legacy of her own while honoring the legacy she had inherited. She was someone who had faced the worst truth imaginable and found a way to transform it into something meaningful, something healing, something that could prevent others from experiencing similar pain. As they walked out their front door into the crisp Colorado morning, Elena took Sophia's hand and felt the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing you are exactly where you belong, doing exactly what you were meant to do. The past would always be part of their story. The pain would always echo in quiet moments, the loss would always create empty spaces that no amount of healing could completely fill. Marcus Ashworth would die in prison, carrying his guilt and his remorse to whatever judgment awaited him. But the future belonged to Elena and Sofia Vasquez, inheritors of brilliance and integrity, builders of justice and love, living proof that even the darkest tragedies could give birth to hope. In the distance, the Rocky Mountains rose against a crystalline sky, their peaks covered in snow that would melt in spring to feed the rivers that nourished the valleys below. Life continued, flowed, regenerated, transformed. Just as it always had, just as it always would. Just as Elena and Sophia were doing, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of love at a time. The legacy they were building would outlast any fortune, outlive any revenge, outshine any monument built from guilt or grief. It was a legacy measured not in dollars or headlines or convictions, but in the simple, revolutionary act of choosing love over hatred, healing over vengeance, hope over despair. And as Elena Vasquez walked her daughter to school on a bright Colorado morning, she knew with absolute certainty that Roberto and Maria would approve.